Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Reliability Gang podcast. I have a very special guest. Welcome Chris Hullum from UE Systems. How you keeping, buddy?
Good morning, Will. I'm fine, thank you very much. Keeping busy and out of trouble, so can't complain.
Always busy, Chris. This is something I've wanted to do for ages. I've known Chris for a really long time. I think it was back in my Eric's days. I did my UE level 1.
About 7 years ago, over 7 years ago now.
So that was in Birmingham, wasn't it?
It was.
So long ago. But do you know, the one thing I loved about that course was how interactive, insightful, and I'll be honest, I went on that course not thinking ultrasound was actually going to be any use to me. To be honest, I had this weird preconceived perception, which was wrong. And after that course, I was like, wow, what is the power of what ultrasound can do? So
it's a common thing that we see.
Mate, you completely spun my perception on ultrasound and what it is and how it can help. And I think at the time I kind of thought it's just a kind of point and shoot, have a little listen. It doesn't give you much other than that. But when I first started, obviously maintain as well, obviously I got a UP 9000.
You did?
And it was just, especially moving from a new system, because we was using SKF aptitude at the time in micrologs. And I went to Proof Technic. So, you know, obviously the collectors essentially give you the same information, but they can present them a little bit differently. So having the confidence in a new kit, having that UP 9000 with me was just a godsend to listen to things as well. And every time I see a high envelope reading and I kind of tested and listened, I kind of got a bit of a connection between what is bad vibration, why it's ultrasound.
Absolutely.
So I was getting these connections which are so handy and helpful.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I mean, end of the day, with the ultrasound, you know, it's helping you enhance your senses, isn't it? You know, things like listening. And we always talk about, you know, how we use technologies and that, but also using your own human senses to help you with these things. It just enhances that sort of thing.
It does, yeah, because observation side of things as well is so important for us at Maintain, and we always try to make sure we're doing everything we can to look. But I think sometimes hearing things for the guys is amazing, and we've actually invested in, you'll see the post soon, in 5 new UP 9000s for the guys. Which
Quite
is
a collection.
Quite a collection, and the new ones are even better actually, because you've done some slight modifications. The UP 9000 is such a classic, like it doesn't change, because if it ain't broke,
don't fix it.
Don't fix it.
Exactly.
And I've had that equipment years ago, but now they've put like some nice, the rubber's changed slightly. I've noticed the little additions, and a big rubber thing on the cap there, and these tiny little additions as well just make it a little bit nicer to have as well.
Well, that's it. The 9000 is probably one of the most popular units because it's so simplistic as well, and it's so rugged. They go forever, you know.
That's what I love about it. That's what I love about it, because I think on the market we've tried a few other ultrasound kits as well in our time, and we've obviously had a dabble and play. But the thing is, with a few of them, they're a little bit more like vibration collectors. Whereas what I love about the UP 9000, obviously you can get the UP 15000 for that high end kind of technical data collection and all that. But what I love about the 9000, it sits in a holster really well. And I'll send some pictures to you guys when I get the guys already using this stuff. We look like Ghostbusters, man. We've got these caving hats on. We've got these massive like head torches, right? We've got these new as well Bluetooth WS Alert 3M headphones that attach to your helmet. And we've got a Bluetooth receiver on the 9000.
That's right.
So we can wirelessly listen with ear defenders on site.
It's perfect.
It is honestly, the guys look so geared up now, and it's been a while since we've been able to get in. It's cost us a lot of money, but I think for us it's about how do we do the service. Do you know what I mean? So thanks, Chris, for being able to enable that as well, because the idea is now we can have our Falcons here and we can have these wirelessly strapped around. So ergonomically, it's really important as well that ergonomically you can get around the site with all the assets and do your job as well.
Well, that's it, yeah. And if you're carrying lots of kit with you on these sites and doing these surveys and everything else, you know, the 9000 sitting in a holster isn't getting in your way. It's really easy to use, well balanced. And now you haven't got the wired headphones, for example. You've got the wireless connectivity.
You've got that wire as well.
It's straight out. It's a quick draw.
Literally. It's a quick draw, bang. Have a listen to it. And this is why I'm really excited for the guys to obviously get out there and do a bit. Chris is coming over in a couple of weeks to do a bit of training with the guys as well, just to be able to, you know, ergonomically how to use them, because obviously the guys have been using Falcons and not really any ultrasound at all. So it'll be really great to get them kind of into the ultrasound world a little bit as well, and just understand kind of how it works and everything.
Oh no,
like that
absolutely,
as well.
Absolutely. And like you were saying, you've had a dabble through different types of ultrasound technologies and things like that. And you know, like vibration technology, a lot of the technologies today are all very similar and have very similar capabilities. But I think one of the key things I think that you can differentiate there is what sort of support are you going to get from those sort of those vendors.
It's so important, the support,
because support's spot on. You need to have that there, somebody that you can rely on. And
I know, because I've relied on you since back then, and I think even when I was at Eric's, them times we'll call you up. You was there to help us out, and even now when I've started at Maintain as well, and I think that connections and relationships are the most important thing in this industry.
Oh no, absolutely.
I learned a lot, the last few years really doing this business, because a lot of people do want to kind of work with you when you start to get a bit of a name for yourself out there and stuff like that. And I think to myself sometimes, the reason I think I went full circle back to you, Chris, in terms of this arrangement, I think it was always something that we wanted to do, but I think we had to experience as well a little bit and have a little play with things and see what the level of support is like, to then realise, we should be going here for full throttle as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, and I get a lot of inquiries from people that I don't know, but know somebody else that knows me already. For example, we're already users, and that's kind of like when you're doing the right thing, because people are coming to you saying, "Hey, such and such has told me to get in contact with you because they're using your kit, and we're looking at something else, and we want to do that as well." And that's then that you're doing the right job. That's the sort of thing. And, I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer by trade. I want to get things done. I want to make sure things are working.
You want to make sure things are better, don't you? You want to improve things.
That's it.
And that's why we're so aligned with these conversations and chats, because we've, even before this conversation, we spoke passionately about one of my customers that's not listening about a certain defect, and we talked about health and safety and the elements of reliability and how that culture is so important to be able to change. But as well, I think we are on the daily mission, not just to be able to do our ultrasound or vibration or our services. We're on a mission as well to inform the industry about this. I think we're ingrained in the culture change, aren't we?
Oh, massively. And like you say, we were just talking beforehand, and God, we must have spent hours on the phone over weeks and days and months.
I mean, sometimes
saying the same things.
You call me and I look at my phone afterwards. I'm speaking to Chris the whole journey home. Because we've gone on some tangents about certain customers and the culture and stuff, and we can talk all day about these certain stories.
Absolutely. I mean, we're there. You're providing a service. I'm providing a service in some respects. I'm providing equipment and that, and it'd be very easy for us to do what's being asked of us, provide that, and then walk away. We could do that. But the thing is, with anything to do with reliability, that's not the end. It's looking at actually giving that support, holding that hand, and making sure that we can help change the mindset, change the culture. Because, these services and technologies, they're great, they're brilliant, but if you don't change the way that you approach things, then it's always going to fail.
As well, you're so right about that. And I'm really glad you kind of mentioned that as well, because I think a lot of people expect this game to be a really short journey, and sometimes it can take 7, 8 years, 9, 10 years, decades to get that culture to change. And they might have been doing a bit of condition monitoring before, they might have been doing that from the start, but until they actually start to change the culture of what reliability is and everything around it, then it's really difficult for them to really embrace what needs to be moved forward in terms of new ideas and new ways and strategies of actually getting from an end goal. Because how many customers do you talk to, Chris, that don't actually have a goal?
This is the thing. No, all they have, for example, a lot of the times I see is they have a problem, they have an issue, and they go, okay, this technology, that'll fix it. That'll fix this issue. An example, I have one a customer that bought a lubrication grease caddy to help with their lubrication program, and I popped in to give some support. Went to their lubrication store to try and find where the grease caddy was, and we found a whole shelf full of different grease guns that had different types of grease in that weren't marked up.
Oh, no.
Very mucky, very dirty, and it was kind of like, well, guys, we need to think about our lubrication store and how we do that first before we start applying it with a grease caddy.
That's the thing, isn't it? They want to move to the end goal.
Yes.
When they haven't even done the first initial steps that allow them to do the strategy. The second bit better.
Yeah, a strategy. They haven't got a strategy. It's about, right, here's my problem. This could fix it.
Yeah.
But there's other factors that contribute to that issue and that they haven't addressed and they haven't maybe been aware of. It's one of those things.
How do we start to kind of prime the industry a little bit in terms of saying, well, instead of looking at the short term, how do we look at the longer term? How do we look at reliability? How do we get more stakeholders involved with reliability rather than just looking at engineering managers, because obviously you've got procurement, you've got everyone around, the health and safety as well, your environmental, all these things that reliability will improve and tie into. How do we actually start to say, right, here's the centre, this is reliability, how do we draw everyone into the same goal? Because I feel like we've really separated a minute, and it's so difficult.
It is. I mean, if you look at it, most of the time when we're going to sites, we're dealing with maintenance staff, maintenance departments, and when it comes to a reliability program, it involves every department. And the problem is, every department in the organisation is like a chain. And if one of those links isn't on board with that, it's always going to fail.
I know, yeah.
So when you're having these discussions, you need to be talking to people in operations, explaining on how, if they do it this way, it's going to benefit them. Going to the accounts people, if we do it this way, how's it going to benefit them? And trying to make that awareness to them, how these things will benefit them, even though it's not directly seen by them.
I know, and it's almost like having 9 different sales pitches for different people.
It is.
Because every single one of them departments is kind of almost measured on different KPIs. But I suppose reliability does have a branch of every single one of them and a selling point with every one of them as well, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at, for example, with ultrasound, if you think about leak detection, energy savings, you could be discussing certain things with maintenance departments that if they identify all these compressed air leaks and repair them, then those compressed air systems that are being used for operational purposes, those things are going to keep running more reliably and more effectively. Yeah. Then you've got the EHS team, the environmental health people, so you can say, right, well, look, by reducing these leaks, we're going to then save money, but we're also going to reduce the carbon emissions through the excess energy wastage.
Different selling point,
Then the accounts team, oh, look, more money in the budget because your energy bill is going down.
Yeah, which is obviously bottom line straight away.
So
there's so many benefits.
Different departments, if they bring this awareness through, then they will see the cost benefit or the benefit to the organisation.
I know, it's almost like trying to get into a company and then say, right, guys, here's our end goal for reliability. What does reliability give all of your departments and divisions? So like procurement, you'll have more money to spend. EHS, you'll be more compliant with your energy. Manufacturing and operations, you're going to have better quality in your products. Engineering, you're going to have better reliability. Your compressors are now going to last longer. You're going to have less issues and problems with downtime. So all of these things are so important to be able to come under the umbrella of what reliability is.
Yeah.
And that's the way I believe we've got to start not selling this, but raising awareness for it, because a lot of the time when we go to a certain site, it's like, we do this air leak survey, and we've got this new camera that can detect, and engineer managers are like, well, yeah, that's cool technology, but I'm not really looking at them KPIs, Will. I'm looking at different things. So they're kind of interested, but they're not really ready to strike the iron, are they?
No, that's it. Yeah, that's right. I mean, when you're going to these sort of places to visit people and discuss how these things can benefit, you almost want to say to them, right, I want you to bring somebody from accounts in. I want you to bring somebody from environmental health in. You want to bring a bit of everything, because then you can have that same conversation with a twist 4 times at the same time.
I know, and there's so many benefits from one, and that's what I like, especially the air leak stuff. With as well, I like tech. We've invested in the new air leak. What is it? The
UltraView leak detection camera.
UltraView leak detection camera. I need to get to know all the models and numbers. It's all very new to me, the camera side of things anyway. But we've had a little play, and my God, it's so sensitive.
It's very sensitive.
So take me through this. Let the people know about the camera in terms of how is it more sensitive, and how does it actually work from converting that ultrasound to an image?
So what we've got there basically is we've got a large array of sensors on the actual head of the actual device itself, picking up the high frequency ultrasound. You could almost liken each sensor to like an individual eardrum.
So every single one of them little dots, is that a sensor?
A sensor, absolutely, yes.
Okay, wow.
So you're increasing the sensitivity of the device to pick up lower emissions, also from a greater distance. I mean, there's no set range on these things because it depends on what the size of the emissions are being caused out there. But by having that, we're increasing then the signal to noise ratio and everything else. And then it's transposing that on the display as a hotspot as the source of the emission, because you have so many sensors pinpointing out there as an array.
So like each one is then associated to a pixel, is it?
Yeah, that's almost, in some respects. It's very similar in those ways.
How long has this technology been around? Because these cameras are pretty new to the market, aren't they?
Well, you'll be surprised that it's been around for a little while, but as technology has advanced, as components have advanced, they've become obviously more cost effective to build and everything else. And obviously, if you look at the current climate, energy savings is a very big topic.
It's huge right now.
So these sort of devices, are simplistic as well. I mean, you can put it in the hands of an untrained person and they can identify an air leak very easily. I was on a site earlier this week where I was showing how this camera worked, and the engineering manager was like, right, I want to do a test. And I was like, what's that? And he went, I've got an intern here. And they had an intern in from university just doing a bit of work experience as such. And they put the camera in his hands and went, off you go and find a leak. And literally off they went within literally 30 seconds. He was like, I think I've seen something over here. Like, oh, well done, there's a leak. And we didn't even know that was there. And it was like, very straightforward.
Do you know the one thing I love about it? It's the accessibility as well. The majority of the sites that you go to, you can't even get into the areas where most of the leaks are, if that makes sense, depending on interlocks and stuff like that. So you're really relying on having the plant shut down to go in to do an air leak survey. Problem is, when the plant's shut down, the last thing they probably want is an air leak survey, because they're doing a lot of repairs on that day and all the rest of it. So what I really like about it is the accessibility of being able to view air leaks from far away or behind guards and be able to capture them air leaks as well. And what I do like about it is the time element of it.
Yes.
Because now you can identify the leaks. Maybe how much faster would you say it's quicker than not airborne? A rough guess.
I would say it's at least 5 to 6 times faster.
It's got to be 5. It's got to be there because you can take an image as well on the camera of the leak, and you can then actually do the report from the camera, can't you?
No, absolutely, yeah. I mean, when we first released the UltraView, I popped into a few sites. Me being a bit of an older guy, and we talk about embracing change. I was kind of like, oh, this is new. There's no headphones. I can't hear the sound. Oh, I'm not sure about this. And then went to a site where I had a very good user that was using an Ultra Probe already to do air leak surveys, and we said, right, let's go together. Let's go and do a sweep and see how we get on.
Let's have a play.
And we walked out of the office straight away out into the outside, and I was like, oh look, there's a leak over there. And the guy was like trying to scan this thing. Oh yeah, I can hear something. I can hear something over that way. So by the time he'd wandered over and pinpointed it and everything else, I was kind of like, yeah, that's great, but it's there. And by the way, you've got 4 other leaks over here. He's like, what? I was like, yeah, I found them already. And I've taken images already, set distances, costings, it's done. And he was like, wow. So, and then I was sold as well on the concept.
That's kind of where we're sold on it, and we obviously do air leak surveys at Maintain. We are now really going to start to push, because it is a huge kind of KPI on my radar in terms of saying, how do we actually now look at the environment? How do we look at kind of energy savings, and how do we start to become that company that is more conscious about kind of them elements of net zero and all the rest of it? And we've obviously been highly kind of, I'd say a lot of our work is vibration analysis, really, and I'm now really interested to start branching into other areas. And now this camera is going to allow us to be able to really quickly identify more savings and be able to drive them costs down for customers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at it, and I mean, we had COVID and everything else, and then obviously things that are going on in the world as well out of our control, but that also then had an impact on the cost of energy. And
it's just gone crazy. Yeah. I mean, I think is it doubled?
Oh, well, pre-COVID, I would say on average, going around different industries, because we go into all different industries, the average cost for energy before COVID times was probably between 8 to 12 pence per kilowatt hour.
I remember back in the day when I was doing the kind of the UE stuff with our cameras, I remember it was kind of like, I'm sure it was like 5 kilowatt. 5 pence.
Yeah, it was quite low.
Sure that was what my reports were saying.
Yeah.
And so if now, I mean, for my particular house, I'm paying, I think, 29p or something like that.
Which isn't bad, actually.
Which isn't bad right now. No, it's actually got a good deal. But that is, I think people forget. They don't see the tangibility, I suppose, of the actual increase of where we've actually gone to. It's actually phenomenal.
I've seen one customer that their energy costs were at about 68 pence per kilowatt hour now.
Wow.
And a difference from something like 15 pence per kilowatt hour previously before COVID. And so you think about the associated cost behind that is absolutely crazy. And that's why it was a big topic.
This stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to, because we can't, let's be honest, we shouldn't be wasting energy anyway.
No, we shouldn't be.
We shouldn't have to go through this really high increase for us to be able to be prompted to be able to do these things anyway.
And if you think, and if you think about it, a lot of corporate industries are always shouting about wanting to be carbon neutral, reduce their carbon emissions, not necessarily about saving their money on the energy. But with these leak surveys and these reports, it also tells you the reduction in carbon emissions if you actually repair those leaks as well.
Amazing.
And that's a key factor in the current climate. You know, these companies are looking to make sure that they are carbon neutral. And again, doing your leak surveys, yes, it saves money, but also it reduces your carbon footprint.
That's what I'm saying with this as well. And I am surprised because obviously, in terms of what we've done, we've not done a massive amount with air leak surveys, if I'm honest, Chris. And we're dealing with a lot of big companies, and we have obviously tried to prompt them within, you know, again, talking to the right people is always a struggle. But, you know, when you see of all these benefits that they can get out of just having their leak survey and actually getting these things repaired, because we do a find and fix thing now as well, because what we were doing previously was just going in, identifying the leaks and never get fixed. You know, size, just if anything, they're getting busier. So we'd be like, right, we'll come in, but we'll come in after. We'll obviously source all the parts that require, you know, refits, and whether they're fittings or, you know, filters or actuators or whatever. We'd come in and we'd come and replace these things as well. So, you know, essentially, like, now is the time to be doing these things. If
oh,
you've
no,
not been doing it before. It's just, it's crazy that a lot of people ain't doing it, really. Do you know what I mean? And that did kind of, like, rattle my mind.
Well, that's the thing. I mean,
why are they not doing these?
Well, if you look at it, I mean, you know, when a site will get their energy bill, for example, you don't get an itemised bill of saying, well, by the way, all these air leaks that you've got are costing you this much. They don't have that. They just have a bill for the energy consumption. You've used this much energy, and this is how much it's costing you.
That's a problem,
the thing.
isn't it?
Yeah, so you don't see it. It's hidden.
Hidden,
and as long as production's still running, no one's complaining.
You're right, because at the end of the day, essentially, as long as obviously the output is bigger than what you know the input is, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, in terms of money, then people ain't going to really scrutinise every element until they see it.
This is
you know?
it.
And
exactly.
I think that's the beautiful thing about the air leak survey. Quite quickly, we can quantify the amount that you'd potentially spend in energy in a year very quickly.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, people start to listen because they're like, what? Like, what was that price? Like, wow, that's a lot of money.
Exactly. I had a customer that purchased one of these UltraView cameras, and literally within a week of them having it in their hands, they showed me a report that they had done within that week that identified over £100,000 worth of leaks.
That's just crazy.
So if they were to just leave them for the next year, that would cost the company £100,000 in energy usage.
It's just mad. It's just such a huge saving.
And most of these sort of air leaks are simple, quick fixes as well.
Yeah, they are. They're literally, most of them are kind of severed pipes or, you know, pneumatic fittings, really, aren't they? They
press fittings and all those sort of things.
Stuff that is so easy to implement as well. We've got to get better as you know, for reliability, really. We do, as manufacturing has to start improving these things, because a high percentage of the customers that we visit, they're not regularly doing these things. I think they should be done quarterly, because we do quarterly surveys for a particular customer with a lot of compressed air, and we find a lot. From even 3 months' time, there's fittings that fail, or pipes that are severed, or whatever. And this is the thing, if you're never actually doing it, think of how bad it's getting over time. You know, if we can justify being there quarterly because of the energy savings with that, then God, we've got to start doing it more.
That's the thing. I mean, you know, a leak survey is not the end of the game. You know, you're constantly having these leaks appearing over time, so you need to keep on top of them. Initially, when you first start and then repair them, you see a great win. You see big improvements. It's one of the quickest ROIs with the use of ultrasound. Literally, the return on investment is very, very quick if you actually repair them, as I tell people, because they're like,
it's just a number, really.
Like, you know, you could identify £100,000 worth of leaks and go, yeah, that's great. Look at that, that's brilliant. Have you repaired any? No,
we haven't. Well, you're not saved anything then.
So well done.
You got to fix them.
Exactly.
And it's the same with the VA stuff. You know, we identify a bearing defect. Essentially, it's just information until it's acted upon.
It's still there.
And this is why we created Solve. This is the exact reason why, because we don't want to be the company that just gives us the problems. We want to be part of the solution. And what we do understand is, like, I think a lot of companies do want to do the things we tell them that they need to do, but they just don't have the manpower. I mean, what is going on, Chris? I don't know about you, but the last 2-3 years, every single site that we go into at the minute, it just seems to be so undermanned. It's unbelievable. Do you think this is the way it's going now in terms of the future?
It seems that workload seems to be going up with less manpower. I think there's still a big lack of tradespeople in the industry out there.
Do you think it's inherently a skills issue, or do you think inherently it's a saving exercise? Because I think COVID was a bit of a stimulus for all of this, because they obviously probably realised, we can run more lean. Whether that's a good thing long term or not is questionable, because short term, you might get by, but what is the long term impact effects as well?
Yeah, it's hard to put a specific area where we're lacking on this and why we're doing it. I think we are getting to a point where I think there was a very large number of baby boom generation engineers starting to retire.
And at the same time,
at the same time, maybe we're not having enough apprentices coming through, or it doesn't seem fashionable. Trades or career as such. People don't necessarily see engineering as a career, but it's raising that awareness, I think, as well with it.
Do you think as well, like especially for young? I think a lot of people think engineers are cool, but do you think people think it's too difficult? I get that feeling sometimes.
Or it's like getting your hands dirty.
Or that, maybe, I think maybe the new generation.
If you think about it, how many children growing up these days get to roll around in the mud eating worms and stuff like that these days?
Crazy, I know, I think we are growing up. I mean, you got kids, haven't you, Chris?
Yeah, exactly.
You see it like them in the world that they've grown up in.
It's very different.
It's just so different to the world that we have.
Absolutely.
I think when I was younger, it was the first Game Boy. I think the big Game Boy thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I was absolutely crazily in love with that thing. And it was 2D screen. I had to put this little attachment on it with a little. It was literally a magnifying glass with a light on, so I could see the actual screen. Whereas my kids now, they're playing. Well, Marty's playing the PS5 online against the world. In these games, it's like...
But also, if you think about it, when we were growing up as well, and when, obviously, some of the older generations grew up, everything we had, if it broke, you could repair it.
Yeah,
or find parts for it. Think about your car, when you buy your first car, if something went wrong with it, you get the oil coming out the back, you get covered in oil fixing, repairing it.
But it was fun.
But technology today...
Doesn't allow you to do
Doesn't allow you to repair it. It's a case of, that's not working, replace it.
That's an interesting analogy. So there may be then even the mindset and not conditioning, but the environment doesn't allow people to really get their hands dirty until they actually get involved with engineering, and then it's all new.
That's it. I mean, I first started my engineering career in the military, and the military, we use quite old technology at times, but it's technology that you can repair,
and you can
rely on it, and you can repair components. You can pull things apart, test stuff, and identify where they're coming from, and then repair those parts. The technology now that's replaced those sort of things, it's a case of if it's a failure, it's a code, and a guy in another country, on another time zone said, by the way, you've got a failure on this. We'll send you a new board. Just swap the board. So you lose that skill.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, everything's kind of almost geared up to this kind of automated way of doing things.
Box on, box off approach now.
Straight
with a lot
in,
of
box
things.
in, pay for the part, then obviously probably at quite a high premium. And this is the thing, do you think skills are getting lost with just the... And what is the reason for that? The reason probably would be to be more efficient.
Well, the components are cheaper these days, and raw materials cheaper, quicker, and it's about keeping that uptime. I mean, I used to love getting a soldering iron out, getting a multimeter out,
I still do,
working my way things through and stuff like that. But these days, you don't have that need for that, and it's just one of those things. It's a shame, but I mean, even when we teach with ultrasound, I kind of get my old lecturer teacher hat on and then start getting a whiteboard out and drawing protons, neutrons, electrons, and talking about the theory of electricity and everything else before we start the conversation on electrical principles and everything else with ultrasound. Because I always think of, if you can understand this bit here, the rest is just going to fall straight into your lap.
Yeah, definitely.
So things like that, making sure you give that all round education.
It's getting a mixture, isn't it? I think it's using technology, but then reverting back to the theory and doing it back to the old school ways, pen on board, really explaining why things are happening. I think that's what I really enjoy about teaching the VA side of things, especially. It's more about kind of how do we now really get this theory into their heads in a practical fashion, but how can they really comprehend it?
Yeah.
Rather than just seeing it as info, how can they really... I get it. You know what I mean? The aha moment.
But you've also got to think about as well, look at the way technology is advancing as well. And, you think about the world of the IoT world and stuff like that with online systems and monitoring. It does fit a need for engineering departments because of the lack of manpower, the lack of time and stuff like that. PM optimization and stuff. You see that, and some people see that as a godsend, and it's brilliant. But also then people then become reliant. and say, well, this thing's going to tell me when something's wrong, and then I'm going to do that then. So again, there's a bit more of that, reliance on that, and again, potentially losing a bit of skill set and things like that as well.
Of course, and I think that's where the balance and awareness needs to come in, especially when it comes down to IoT, because we use it a lot. I mean, we've had great applications where we're monitoring things now. Do you know what I mean? I can log onto this computer and I can see, the condition of some assets that we've got with some Eagle systems, and all the rest of it, and Airburst systems as well we've used in the past as well, and a lot of these different sensors that we are currently using in terms to, as to monitoring things. But as well, we've got to understand that it's not the end all, because you are right. There's a limitation of just putting a sensor on and saying, oh, that's covered. There's got to be a level of, understanding that not everything can be caught by VA.
No, exactly.
A lot of people think it's the end all. Like, think, they've done VA on that. That's complete. If you did a FAMICA on a certain asset, I could guarantee there's still 5 or 6 ways that asset could potentially fail.
Absolutely.
That are not detectable by vibration.
There's not one technology out there that's going to identify all potential failure modes, is there?
No,
there isn't.
Right.
And you've got to understand that.
And this is why I hate the whole argument of vibration's better. No, ultrasound's better. And you see these kind of threads on LinkedIn, and you get these, you can tell there's some people that have been in the ultrasound field for years, and vice versa, and you see them kind of going at each other. It's like, guys, just put your hands around each other, come together and use both technologies, and be good condition monitoring asset reliability engineers. It's not about being a vibration analyst or ultrasound expert. It's about taking all the tools in your box to be able to really benefit what you're doing.
No, absolutely. And normally you see those arguments, and it's normally by people in a position that's trying to sell you something.
I know, 100%. Well, it's so driven by ego, isn't it?
And, again, you've got to have that engineering background to appreciate that you can use them in harmony. I would never ever argue that ultrasound is better than vibration, or vibration is better than. Or,
I'll tell you though, Chris, I would have done like 5-6 years ago when I was before I did the ultrasound course. I was such a vibration fanatic, and I'm so glad that I see the other side of the open picture of the world. When you're young, you can be quite naive to think that things are better or whatever. And when you start to learn and especially as a young engineer, you do get to a place sometimes where you're kind of assuming rather than really using facts and experience.
And I mean, like you say there, it's education as well. But it also depends on how you're mentored and educated as well, because you might get trained in a certain technology, and you might have quite a influential trainer, teacher that will make you think that this is what I need, this is the be all and end all. Whereas, for example, when we teach like our Cat 1 and Cat 2 ultrasound courses, we talk about, this is a great technology and it works well in these areas, but also consider utilising it as part of a wider programme with other technologies as well.
Yeah, of course.
Have that understanding. We don't try and go, you must use ultrasound here and there, and it's this thing will be brilliant for you and it'll look after you forever. No, understand your assets, understand the way they fail, but also understand the limitations
of each one, because you don't want to be again, managing expectations is really important for site as well sometimes, because sometimes we've been on site in the past and something has happened to an asset or whatever, but we haven't picked up. The expectation is always like, is it on the vibration analysis? And again, I think sometimes it's almost as well explaining to the customer, and this is probably something that Maintain didn't do very well initially, really explain it. And I think when I did the Mobius course, and we are now obviously doing the vibration courses and selling it, there was a little piece in there about random failures of how random things are, and understanding there's this infant mortality zone of things when they are changed, the likelihood or risk does obviously increase, but over time there's no real change in when. Do you know what I mean? An asset can fail. It's completely random.
That's right,
yeah. So, trying to explain that to customers sometimes can be challenging.
Oh, absolutely, because, you'll see some companies and that will introduce these technologies, and then, we know that with random failures, you can still get random failures no matter how sophisticated and mature your condition-based maintenance program is. You can use all the technologies you want, but you could still get a failure that you wouldn't detect. It can happen.
And sometimes it's not even down to the fact that it's poor running conditions. No. We had one quite recently, actually, a few months ago, and I'm really open about when I talk about these things, because this is the reality. Most condition companies will be like, no, we detect absolutely 100% of our failures. That's sorry, it's not happening. There's some that slipped in there. A very small number, but there's some are. But
small
we had
margins.
one. Yeah, small margins. But we had one the data didn't say anything. You could literally go to that machine when it was there and it was purring before it even happened, right? And, 2 weeks later, you've got a failure on it, and it was not detected. And that's the thing. The idea is, because there wasn't an online system on it, we don't know at what point the defect was initiated to failure, the P&F curve. Usually 1 month surveys is generally, 9 times out of 10, you're going to capture them assets as wear-related issues. Right, and we're still even monitoring some assets right now. They're still holding on for dear life. That'll be there for about a year, and you don't need the collector to tell you there's an issue or defect, right? You can hear it. But, for whatever within that point as well, you have to understand that there is still even a risk of failure, even with monthly.
Oh, absolutely.
surveys.
Yeah, this
or
is it.
There might not have been anything in the day. It could have just randomly gone, due to some form of process or whatever. We don't know that in terms of what it was. So, it's almost as well explained that we ain't going to get them all.
No.
We'll get the majority, and we'll help you improve the reliability from our root cause analysis of what we find, but we're not going to capture everything.
No, the key thing behind it is improving that overall equipment effectiveness, isn't it?
Yeah,
making sure that it is available when needed, and by doing these using these technologies, using these approaches, you will get there with those. You will improve those, but have that thing in the back of the mind that accepting, that there is still a level of risk.
Yeah,
there is still a level of risk.
There's always risk, and that kind of points me on to our next talking point. And we discussed AI, we discussed these things, we discussed online systems and stuff like that. One thing that really I do like what you are doing is the on-track system, and I think it's kind of one of its kind, to be honest. I don't think many companies are doing this type of technology.
It's not very common.
It's not common. And the beautiful thing is, I love condition-based lubrication, but there's even the risk to doing condition-based lubrication essentially as well, because I suppose it all depends on the intervals when you're testing these assets as well.
Exactly. But
this is where the on-track for me is really beautiful, and I think this solves this issue, especially for the critical assets. I mean, essentially, you probably wouldn't want to put an on-track on every single bearing you've got on site.
It's not feasible.
It's not
practical, is it? No.
But for your real critical assets, and there's some assets as well that we're considering of actually, potentially pushing this forward to. I know a couple of other sites. We do asset care, but with these asset care sites that we're doing, we do condition-based lubrication. So we look after lubrication on these assets, right? So we have done kind of lubrication surveys of understanding how much grease should be in there anyway as a rough guideline level, and we're kind of using VA and ultrasound, for example, to be able to identify that poor oil film and then replenish the oil, the grease when required. But okay, great, we go to site, we find that a bearing needs lubing, we can lube it up there and then, right? Brilliant. We can identify that from our collectors, then we can do the test after we lubricate, and we can then understand whether there's a sufficient oil film within that bearing. Brilliant, great, thumbs up. But the point we leave that site, when do we know, till we go to the next following month, that's going to go back and pour lube again, right? And if it constantly is going back and pour lube, then maybe we should do a little bit of both, bit of schedule, put a little bit in, so we're not starving the bearing so much, then doing a little bit of condition based, but then you have to be careful of that as well, because we don't want to be over lubricating either.
Absolutely.
So there's this kind of push and pull, but what the on track does is beautiful, isn't it? Because you can now literally, it'll let you know as soon as that oil film starts to deplete, and you can lubricate like that
instantly. So that's it. I mean, it's a great point you bring it onto, and lubrication again. It's such a high percentage of premature bearing failures are lubrication related.
But not even that, mate. Like, how many have we seen? Like these fans, like self lubricators just installed on them. They run forever. They're not calculated correctly. Well, we went to one site 3-4 months ago, and we repacked 5 fans because they were over lubricating. They were caked. All the bearings were getting hot because there was too much lube in them, because these self greasers were just set on. I don't think there was many studies done. It was quite a major company as well that sorted this out. And this is where I don't lose faith, but I'm just a bit like, where was the strategy here? Do you know what I mean? Because we've come in and essentially, now they've put 5 of their critical fans at risk of failure.
Oh, absolutely. It's understanding.
You're now causing it. So like we should be. The whole idea of it is to be proactive, isn't it?
It's education again, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's understanding how things work and that sort of thing. I mean, like you say, with the on track, if you look at a condition, ideal place you want to be is a condition based lubrication program. lubricating that bearing when it tells you it needs grease, not necessarily just running it on running hours, X amount of grease, this many running hours all throughout the year. Because the friction level is the thing that the on-track is monitoring, because it's the friction that generates the ultrasound.
But that's the beautiful thing about ultrasound, because it can pick up earlier than most other technologies. You can then replenish that before it potentially causes damage.
Well, this is it. Yeah, if you think about a lot of bearing failures, most bearing failures would have manifested itself at the start as an increase in friction.
Yeah.
And that increase in friction over time will then lead to further damage. So, if you looked at a manual condition-based lubrication program, for example, you'll go out to a site, you'll see your alarms or indications that the bearing requires grease. So you'll be there and you'll be using your technology to apply the grease, making sure you're applying the right amount, bring it to its baseline value in that. And then you'll walk away and come back in a month or two's time maybe to do some more checks. Now, again, if you've got a very early stage defect occurring at that point, that lubrication at the time could actually mask that issue. But it seems at the time while you're there to be like, okay, we've done that, that's fine. You walk away and 5 hours later, that value's gone back up to where it is, and then we'll carry on creeping up until you get there next time and go, oh, it was a little bit higher than last time. And it's going to slowly go that way. So like with the on-track, you have that ability to monitor that friction level continuously, 24/7.
24/7,
So as soon as you see that slight rise in friction due to a reduction in lubrication, it's going to give you that alarm. And then all of a sudden, the on-track's going to go into action. Provide that very small amount of grease, because a good, adequately lubricated bearing doesn't actually need that much grease.
You look at the size of a bearing.
No, it doesn't need much grease.
What was it? Peter Boone put a post up recently with that end shield. What I don't understand is, like, if you got a grease gun, and you actually ejected that grease gun, and you looked physically at the amount of grease that is being produced, right? Like, kind of in your head as an engineer how much grease is going out. I think a lot of engineers don't. I think this is like a magic grease, and it it's got to go somewhere when you put this stuff into it. So if you've got a motor like say that big, right, and you've put about 20 odd shots in it, where do you think the grease is going to go? It's going to go into the motor, isn't it? And this is the one thing I don't understand.
Oh, a lot. We used to say this a lot. We used to joke. It's lubrication's the answer to everything. Oh, it's a bit noisy. We'll put some grease in it. Oh, it's getting a bit warm. Well, we'll put some more grease in it.
But the thing is, but that's another discussion, because we discussed that on another lubrication podcast as well, is that generally if you've over-lubed the bearing, the symptom is going to get hot because there's too much grease in there, right? Can't engage the film. You're going to get friction as well.
Exactly.
So again, when you get that friction, it's going to, it's going to come up in the ultrasound. It's going to come up in your vibration test. But the bearing's getting hot, but it's over-lubed. So the more you put in, you're actually now causing it.
Yeah.
So there's another level of understanding of knowing what. Essentially, sometimes, when we do get like lube factor or friction related events happen, doesn't necessarily mean that the bearing is starving of grease. It could mean it's got too much.
Well, that's it. And that's what we teach when we teach about how we do condition based lubrication. Is
there, this is interesting. This is a question that's popped into my head. Is there a different sound to over lubricate a bearing friction wise and under surely there must be slightly different.
What you find is that if you've got a bearing that requires lubrication, you'll have a high amplitude, a high decibel value, for example. It'll normally be generally like a uniform sounding sort of sound, like a white noise coming from the bearing.
Yeah.
And as we lubricate, you'll start to find that value start to reduce.
Yeah.
So the tonal quality will stay the same, but it'll just get lower in amplitude. Once it doesn't go any lower, that's kind of your point where the bearing's telling you, right, I've got enough grease now, I'm baseline, I'm happy. But if you were then to continue lubricating, and we've had some sound files where we've done this, and you start to hear all of a sudden that it goes quiet, and then all of a sudden it just starts picking up again, and all of a sudden rises quite quickly.
Yeah,
and you're like, well, but all we've done is just apply more grease because we're packing it out. So it's increasing the friction. So obviously we teach, if you start applying grease and the friction level goes up, the ultrasound level goes up, then you stop because the bearing already has enough. So you might have seen a rise in decibel value because of an issue, and then you come to think, oh, I'll grease it, and it goes up again. you know it's not a lubrication-related issue. It's actually a physical issue that's occurring with the bearing.
There's something else there that requires a little bit more troubleshooting.
And that's it.
It's very interesting, that is.
Yeah, and that's where the on-track also helps, because we talk about condition-based lubrication, and you'll do it. It's almost still time-based in some respects, because you're collecting your data and lubricating based on the data, which is good. That's a great starting point. That's a great place to be. But then if you've got a big time period between that, you'll see that value go up again to a point where it might give you a lubrication alarm. There's still been a little bit of excess friction occurring than you'd ideally like. And that's where, like I say, the on-track will then come in, because you could then see that smaller rise and then instantly provide a much smaller amount of grease to bring it back down. Yeah. So what we find is that the on-track system will lubricate often and little.
But that's the best way
to keep it at its sweet spot.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, and essentially the best, shall we say, the best lubricated thing is essentially oil, really, and it replenished all the time. But we know we can't obviously achieve that with most applications, and this is where grease is now kind of had its play in the industry and moving forward. And you are right, that is little and often is the best way. And I think if you really want to get to the extremes of that, you've got to go to a full online system. But my argument is, well, a lot of people are like, well, that's expensive. Well, it doesn't matter if it's your most critical asset on site, and we know that lubrication is a number one factor to improve the reliability. Every single asset that is important and that critical, it should be having one of these systems.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially anything over 300 kilowatts. Yeah, 100%.
No, absolutely. I mean, again, it's again looking at the reliability program, isn't it? It's doing your FAMICAs, looking at your criticality, and then looking at identifying the key areas where you utilise these. Because you wouldn't use an IoT system on everywhere on a plant. It's just not cost effective.
You crescendo it into different type of services, whether it's handheld VA, and maybe you'd even then extend that. Maybe then that even some of it doesn't even need to get collected because you can run it to failure. Because it doesn't have impact on safety, production, environment, and
exactly
all the rest of it. So it's having the whole overall outlook of all of these things. And that's the beautiful thing about reliability. Is there's so much involved with it.
There is, and it's
not just one thing, is there?
I like the thing you raised there, about run to failure. Run to failure is not a dirty word. No. Some people say run to failure as if it's a swear word or something.
Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. You can say that. You can say run to failure. It's okay.
It's only okay though once you've done the studies.
Exactly.
That's the only issue.
Right.
It's never really acceptable until you really can understand why that strategy is implemented. But the fact is, it is a strategy, and if it warrants that for the asset, then why not? We've got to be able to go with what's most cost effective as well.
Exactly, that's the thing. But yeah, I think, like I say, from what we've been seeing in industry recently with different trade shows we've been to and everything else, when it comes to ultrasound, the key areas are things like energy savings, condition monitoring, the world of IoT. People are wanting to implement more IoT systems to help them because of the lack of manpower and time. And the lubrication task, if you think about a very large plant and you've got somebody that has to go out, walk around all over the place on the site with different types of grease guns, different greases and everything else. It's time consuming. Time consuming.
And you need a lot of knowledge as well for that in terms of understanding the effects of everything we're doing and all the rest of it.
Exactly.
And that's what, I do really like the on-track stuff. I think it's quite cool.
Yeah,
very innovative. And I think people should start considering this for their critical assets especially because a lot of the time, a lot of people will go down the route, well, why don't we just put a self-greaser on? But a lot of these assets, they don't run 24/7.
No.
And then, you've got the Vib Lube stuff that we provide as well through grease, and that's very good. But then you have to really be reliant on making sure that your schedules are perfect. And how do you know that? Unless you put an online system when you're tracking it daily.
Yep.
And really, to get the best understanding of setting something like that up, you need to really monitor that asset for a good 2 months to understand what you're doing is actually having the right effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
And this is where the on-track will completely trump all of these things, because the idea is, we're not relying on it constantly ejecting. We're relying on the condition. And then as soon as it does go into that friction state, it's sorted out.
Exactly.
Every single time.
And then telling you afterwards it's done what it's done as well.
Yeah.
It'll tell you how much it's used and how.
But that's beautiful as well, isn't it? Because what you could do is actually track, 3 months worth and say, this is the exact amount of grease this particular asset would need, and then because that is the most accurate way of understanding the amount.
Well, absolutely, yeah, because you will have continuous data on the friction level of that bearing. If that's running 24/7 all the time, you will see what the grease demands are on that bearing.
How do you think? Right, this is another question. I've always thought about this. How do you think manufacturers, OEMs, understand how much grease is required? What studies do they do to understand?
It's a good question. I'd love to know how they do all those calculations.
Yeah, it's just really interesting.
This is it. I mean, if you look at it, an OEM will give you sort of guidelines of recommended grease amounts, and they'll give you based on certain factors. But also, you'll have tables to do other calculations, and that could also depend on humidity, temperature,
I know, yeah,
things like
all these
that. And
things,
if any of these things change by even just a factor of 1 in certain areas, that could have a massive implication on the calculation of the amount of grease.
Yeah.
And that same bearing could be utilised in a North Sea oil rig, and it could also be used in a clean room in a pharmaceutical plant.
Yeah, or even
where the
like
demands
in
are going to be
Saudi
different.
Arabia,
Exactly.
where it's really hot. And
the demands are going to be so different.
So true, because I see the metrics as well. When I was doing a bit of lubrication studies and stuff like that myself, I see that even having a vertically mounted motor is very different to having something that's mounted horizontally.
Again, speed, load, and everything else as well.
Yeah,
different factors.
Humidity as well, and environment and dust.
Yep.
Huge impact on how much grease is ejected. So if the OEM has some sort of understanding of what it could be, then what about all the conditions around it? Then surely that throws all of that out. So if we're just basically relying solely on manufacturers' recommendations, when we know that the adverse conditions of all these different other elements can have a huge effect on that, and we can't actually rely on that, can we?
No, exactly. This is it. I mean, you can learn a lot from it, I would say.
Oh, yeah,
and you can
100%.
gather a lot. And to be fair, like we say, we've seen so many people say, wow, we've had this in use now, and the amount of grease we're actually using now is nowhere near as much as we were.
So they're actually saving, and that's more sustainable as well.
Yeah. Again, there's that word, sustainability.
It is, because if less grease is used, then, well, come on, less needs to be produced to be able to maintain
and how nice would it be to be sat here, for example, pull up your phone and go, oh, yeah, I can see the condition of all those bearings right now. Oh, I'm going to just lubricate that bearing. And I could just press a button on my phone, and that bearing will get lubricated. And that could be on the other side of the world.
Yeah, that's really clever. That's clever.
That sort of stuff. That's the way things are going. And, we at UE, we as you see, we like to innovate and bring out new things to market. We're continuously developing new technologies, new
and that's
systems
why we love
and everything
UE, Chris. And that kind of leads us to our last kind of talking point. We now kind of going in with UE as well. We're really trying to promote the brand because we love it. I love what Chris is about. I love what UE is about actually as well. I love just how, I don't know. It's hard. It's a bit of a feeling.
It's passion.
It's hard, isn't it, to explain? Like for me, it's really difficult to explain what UE are about. But everyone, even at UE, brilliant on LinkedIn. Peter Boone, all the guys out there as well, always really followed what we're doing as well at Maintain. And I really appreciate that as well. It's kind of like a nice family, but a very professional, informative, supportive one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would. If I could describe UE Systems as an organisation, it's a family.
Yeah, I feel
a family.
that, and I think that's why it resonates with me.
It is, and we are always there. I know that if I called somebody at 11 o'clock at night, it doesn't matter where in the world they are, they'll answer that phone. They always want to help each other, and if the way that we work together, helping each other out, we do exactly the same with our customers. And the key thing every time is support.
Yeah,
and all of our customers, I like to treat my customers like my friends.
Yeah.
Because if they need some help, I want to help them. And so do the rest of our team in UE. We just want to help. And that's
the reason why I love UE as well, the support element. The products are incredible as well. Now, don't get me wrong, the products are, for me, number one in terms of what I've used. And that's my opinion, of course. A lot of people have different opinions on what they prefer to use or whatever. But again, this is the reason why we've partnered up with UE. We want to be able to, as well, inspire the world with ultrasound as well. We understand the use case for it. We understand how important it is for reliability. And we've got to be able to have a supportive network with ultrasound, essentially, from a maintained perspective in terms of us being able to, provide potentially ultra probes, grease caddies, condition-based lubrication, on-track systems as well, air leak stuff. So, we are now, we can help you guys out and working with UE and with Chris to be able to get the solution to you guys as well. So that's a huge announcement for me, and I'm really proud to be able to be a part of that as well, Chris.
That's it. It's like-minded people like to work together. That's the key thing, isn't it?
So,
share that passion.
I'm looking forward to to going out. So if you do, guys, if you've seen this and you like anything we've discussed, if you like the fact of the on-track, you like the ideas of the ultrasound and in terms of just listening, if you like the air leak camera in terms of air leaks or whatever, get in touch with either one of us and we'll be able to help you out and point you in the right direction. Because if I can't tell you, I'll tell you this guy can, because when it comes to ultrasound, there's not one thing that this guy doesn't know. And this is another reason why I like to be around people in the industry like yourself, because how much knowledge you can gain from these conversations as well. It's just invaluable. You've got to learn from people that have been there for years and doing it, and experts in their field as well. So I appreciate your time here as well. You've come all the way down as well. I know Chris is a busy man, he's got a lot to do, he's probably got a lot to do after this, but as well, appreciate you coming over and spending your time out in the podcast studio, part of the Reliability Gang, and sharing your wisdom and knowledge.
No, that's it, thank you. And I do know quite a lot about ultrasound, but I'm still learning other things as well.
And that's what I love. I'm very humble as well.
Exactly. I still have times where someone says, can I use it for this? And I will quite honestly say, I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what, let's try it.
Yeah.
And that's the way I always like to see things. I will quite happily say when I don't know something, but if I don't know something, I know we'll find the answer to it as well.
Amazing. That leaves us with a beautiful note. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Chris, for coming on again.
Thank you, Will.
And we'll catch you guys soon. Take care.
Take care.